I'm going to have to start this video with a trigger warning because we're going to cover some sensitive topics. I'm not sure what kind of abuse Lima was referring to when she said her and her sisters were abused by their father. I myself am the product of very early childhood physical abuse and psychological abuse. For example, if my stepfather wanted to punish us for something, he would make us go outside to a willow tree and pick a stick from the willow tree, which he would sit there and strip with his pocket knife, making us watch before he flogged us with it. That's a memory I have that goes back to about 5 years old, I think, maybe, or 6. There was some religious indoctrination involved with that as well, but what I do remember is as early as 10 years old, wishing that I was somebody else, born to a different family. And then later on, at about 13 years old, I think I sunk so far into that fantasy that I thought I could be somebody else, if only I could wish it hard enough. I'll just add here that I don't feel that way today, but that was how I felt as a child. It's that feeling that you have no power or control over what's happening around you and to you that I think, in my opinion, lends itself to the fracturing of the personality, which we refer to today as dissociative identity disorder. What I want to do today is introduce you to two people who have been exposed to a much higher level of trauma than I was ever exposed to help you understand what dissociative identity disorder is and how differently Australia is treating people with this disorder versus how America treats it, and also how authorities approach people with DID, which is also a vast contrast to the way American authorities treat people with DID. Anyway, let's get into it. The two people that I want to introduce you to are Tim Roy and Jeni Haynes. So we'll start with Tim Roy's story.
Little Tim was just a boy who saw and felt what the bad men did. Peter was there to absorb the pain they inflicted. Gary felt the guilt of not being able to stop them. Troy carried the anger and suffered the consequences. These are just some of the personas created by our next guest to survive sexual, physical and emotional abuse as a child.
Tim.
Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
You've just written this. This is your autobiography, and might I say that this is a very difficult book to read. It must have been an even more difficult book to write.
Yeah, quite cathartic. It's been a world of self-discovery and a world of actually going through the pain and suffering, even though I'm an adult and I'm aware that I'm not really that vulnerable as I was as a child. It was still quite relevant to go through that process, and I'm sure most survivors find that when they actually are getting to a point of actually accepting and becoming aware originally, and then accepting and then finding some application to live their life with.
Because you endured the most horrendous sexual and emotional and physical abuse. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Well, it was hidden for so long, you know. My brother lived with it for a long time and was quite open about it, and I lived with quite denial, which the other siblings of my family still do, and I respect that. That's where they want to be. It's not something you can actually take someone away from if that's their protectionism. That's where it was. For me, I just created different identities with each emotion that became overwhelming, that the little boy couldn't handle. He would create a friend, and that's how we deemed it.
But it was at the hands of your parents, though, wasn't it?
Originally was my father. Yeah, my father was sort of a mule for some sort of fire ring at the time, and that sort of was pretty strong up to about the age of 10.
So he would deliver you to the fire ring?
Yeah, unfortunately. And, you know, after the age of 10, due to the concept of the New South Wales court system back in those days, that children weren't really credible in a court at up to the age of 10. And then after 10, you know, I found myself being prostituted out. And his safe zone was that I would switch. You know, Peter would carry the pain and Tim wouldn't even know what was going on.
But given that you created these personas, or these personas developed to shield you from this abuse, what do you remember of the abuse? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do now, because I've had to actually absorb that they were my reality.
At the time, you didn't?
No, I just would place myself into a zone of being triggered and knowing that something's coming up, So the personas that had the responsibility to keep the information away would then step up and take on that role. If I can explain it this way, we all have different roles and different modes we deal with every day. You know, some of us are mothers, fathers. Yeah. We go to work, we go to play. You know, we have brothers and sisters. We all react and interact differently with those individuals. However, for me, and for the majority of our population, is that people know when they're switching into those different modes.
Yes.
For me, I didn't know that. And in my writing, I wrote 2 books. The first book was to deal with my army life. The second book was to deal with the fact that it came in some sort of incarnation at this point in time that there's 2 individuals doing the whole story, you know. So
you mentioned your army life, which is a very significant part of all of this. There was even a persona that got you the ability to pursue that army career, really, wasn't it?
There was, yeah.
So it wasn't all there to hide abuse, was it?
No, it's more. It wasn't never. It became dysfunctional when it became imploded, and that implosion was that if we stayed in the arena or the environment we were in, we were going to be discovered. So the actual system maintained its own momentum by imploding itself at certain times, and we would get out of that situation and move on. So ultimately I've had a transient life, and even within the military, of course I had this persona that actually was what they wanted: cold, hard, uncalculating, unemotionalist. Yeah. You know, once I actually left the military, the biggest crutch I had, the biggest collapse I found in my life, was that I didn't have any emotions.
Yes. Oh, okay. And so that's what triggered that something was just not right in your life.
That's why I had to find out what
drinking
was. Yeah, well, drugs and alcohol became the substitute. You know, sex became the substitute. It was just, my world at that time was, you know, a congealed ball of, you know, I use the analogy of the golf ball with the string just completely bound up. Yeah. There was no defining emotions, and this is where Martin Challis and Dr. Jan started to realise. I mean, Dr. Jan was probably dealing with me for 12 months before she actually decided that I was safe enough for me to let me know that there's a possibility that you're carrying more personas around.
What could that moment possibly be like? You must sort of deny it at first, or you wouldn't believe it, would you?
I lived with denial all my life, you know. It was a watershed moment, you know, to actually accept it, and quite strenuous, and you know, to actually start to raise up this suppressed stuff, and then to believe it, you know. And the only way I explain
and to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, my theory I sort of try to share with other survivors is a triple A theory, you know: awareness, acceptance, and application, you know.
So that's a little bit of background on Tim's story. But the thing to note is that he had to make that choice to seek therapy, as opposed to having it forced on him and being caged like a lab rat and unable to escape. So if the premise of virtual reality is being able to put the subject into a triggering environment while at the same time ensuring their safety, I'm wondering if there is any therapeutic value to that. Let me show you what I mean, using Tim's example.
I'm feeling extremely nauseated right at this point in time. I have a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. The child within me is just going, let's go, let's get the fuck out of here. This toilet is one of the many toilets around this area that my father prostituted me out to. I know that if I just keep it together and keep grounded, that this process will work for me, and I have faith in that, and I'm having faith in the people who care about me right at this point. I'm having faith that I know that they are with me right now. I believe that this is where I'm meant to be, and I'm not enjoying this. I'm not fucking enjoying this. This is really fucking hurting, and I need to go through this. I've suppressed it for years, and it's like I need to understand that it's something that is all part of the difficulty of living as a survivor, and the abuse is not just the fucking issue. I have something working up from within me at the moment that really is going to need to come out, and I'm just going to keep working with this. How am I feeling? I'm feeling agitated. How am I feeling? I'm feeling concerned. How am I feeling? I'm feeling embarrassed. How am I feeling? I'm feeling worthless. How am I feeling? I'm feeling responsive. How am I feeling? I'm feeling I need release. How am I feeling? I need relief. I need for this to resolve itself. How am I feeling? I need pain. I don't need pain. How am I feeling? I'm feeling pain. How does that make me feel? Angry. I'm feeling fucking annoyed. I'm seeing myself in that toilet. I'm believing that it's not anymore my fucking imagination, as others have told me. I'm believing that it is all part of what happened, and I'm believing that I need to go through this process. It's extremely difficult. I'm trying to find a positive in this understanding. I'm breathing. How am I feeling? I'm feeling like I'm breathing better. I'm controlling my breathing. That's coming very natural. That is the positive. The positive is I survived. That's all I can take away from this place.
Obviously, that's not virtual reality, that's real life. But we can assume that virtual reality is a similar process. I think the problem that I have with virtual reality is that it assumes a one-size-fits-all type of approach is somehow applicable to each of us with individual personalities. In this small snippet of footage, we see that Tim's really struggling with this experience. But even though he's verbally and visually struggling with the experience, he's not switching alters. And I think it's because Tim doesn't want to be switching alters. He doesn't want to accept that that's his reality. And I can't help wondering if it's because of the stigma associated with DID that he's fighting it so hard. And further, whether the stigma associated with DID was part of what prevented him from seeking therapy for so long beforehand. Tim's story is a little bit different to Jeni's story because a friend of my family knows him personally. And I'd be remiss if I didn't put a link below in the description for his book, Little Tim, Big Tim, which is an autobiography type memoir describing in great detail the experience he had as a survivor. And the other thing that sets Tim aside from Jeni is that his parents passed away. So as an adult, he was never able to confront and therefore reconcile what they did to him as a child. This brings us to Jeni's story and how differently we approach DID in Australia versus the stigmatised approach that we've had in the past.
Were you surprised to find that it's estimated 77 million others in the world have what you have, this particular condition, multiple personality disorder?
Surprised, yes. Horrified would be a better term. I was horrified and I was angry. Because if there are 77 million people with DID, that's 77 million who are not getting justice. And that means God alone knows how many abusers out there getting away with it. You should now think MPD, DID equals victim of crime. And victim of crime as a very small child. So treat them as a victim of crime and stop treating them like they're crazy, because we're not. We're telling the truth the only way we can. And sometimes I was treated as if I was a roaring fantasist.
It might surprise you to know that despite Jeni's 2,500 personalities, she's actually a doctor. She's dedicated her career to battling the stigma associated with DID and MPD. The thing to note with Jeni is that she doesn't try to suppress any of the personalities that want to come forward at any given stage, precisely because she's dedicated her career to battling the stigma. It's a little bit like being diagnosed on the spectrum. When some people find out, their immediate response is, "Oh," and they start talking to you a little bit slower. or a little bit more childlike, and then you'll probably never ever hear from them again. I remember reading in a white paper that Dr. Baron Cohen wrote, where he said it's not entirely understood why a diagnosis of Asperger's should be received as anything different to a discovery of being left-handed or right-handed. Again, it comes back to stigma. Anyway, let's watch Jeni's personalities come forward and how she deals with it. Or more importantly, how her interviewer deals with it.
MPD is, well, we prefer multiple personality disorder. We understand that some people prefer the term dissociated identities, but mine aren't dissociated. It's not like we woke up and said, oh, I have to do something unpleasant. This is my job. I don't want to own that, so I'll push it away. That's not part of me. That's not how we worked. I was born and then I was removed by Symphony, and after that, and I shall ask her to come out and tell you this, because after this it all gets a bit blurry for me.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Symphony.
Hi, Symphony.
Hi.
Symphony, you're 4.
Yes, 4 going on 50. Yes, I've got to be 4 because I'm hoping that when I get to testify that I can grow, because I've got to stay this age because I've got to tell about Daddy.
You are in charge of those facts.
Yes.
You know what happened.
Everything that he did after I took Jennifer away, he did to me. So every single bit of abuse I have experienced, that's my job. My job is to deal with Daddy.
That job was a big job.
It was enormous. The first person I created after me was a man called Eric, and Eric is our organizer. So as people were created, Eric made them an internal landscape where they live, and he gave them their list of rules, and because everybody's got rules.
There are some very strong personalities in there. Some people
Yes.
who are with you
All the time, yes.
all the time. Tell me about them. Let's go through some of those.
Okay, let's start with Muscles.
Let's.
I love Muscles. Actually, I will ask him to come and talk to you, if that's okay.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh, okay. Good. Pants. Thank God. Thank God for pants. Hello.
Hi, Muscles.
Hi.
Muscles, you take on a whole demeanour, don't you? You've
If
arrived.
you're going to be here, you're going to be all the way here. There's no point being a half-ass. Just be here. Yeah.
Your role is protection.
Yeah, my role is complete protection. I'm not the kind that sits back and goes, oh, you know, all will be fine. I'm much more of a get up and do it kind of a guy. And I wanted revenge.
Who are the others in your repertoire of friends, your personalities, who are important to how you function?
Oh, Volcano. Oh, Volcano. Leather god extraordinaire. You want to see him walking around in his leathers.
And what does Volcano do?
Volcano does not do what you think he's doing. So everybody goes, Volcano, that sounds dangerous. No, he is a total sweetheart. His job is to tell you, you are allowed to feel what you're feeling. What you feel is absolutely appropriate. He has a sense of what normal is.
Who else
There's-
are strong, important?
Judas. Judas has been trying to tell. Actually, he is sitting in the background, agitating. You're telling, that's my job. That's my job. He's 7 going on 8, and Judas does exactly what his name says. He is blab. He will go and tell you anything.
I chose Jeni's case to show you because a handful of her alters gave testimony in what we in Australia refer to as a landmark court case against her abuser. This is the first time alternate personalities were ever used in a court case and treated with any credibility.
The trauma that was occasioned to Jeni's body was incredible.
It's fair to say Jeni was tortured.
Absolutely. In this instance, there was no physical crime scene except for Jeni.
Jeni was the crime scene.
Jeni was the crime scene.
Jeni's body was the crime scene.
And her mind.
And her mind.
Yep.
And this is where he made me get on the end of the bed and I was raped by him.
From the time Jeni Haynes was a toddler, her father, Richard Haynes, relentlessly abused her in the family home in Greenacre in Sydney's western suburbs.
This is possibly one of the most terrifying rooms in the universe.
In this police video, Jeni, clutching her childhood puppet Sweep, walks Detective Sergeant Paul Stamoulis through the crime scene. It's in this house where little Jeni Haynes' mind developed multiple personalities to escape the horror of her father's abuse.
Oh my God. Deep breath. You can do this. Okay. It's the same.
The bench?
The bench is the same.
Okay.
I can remember. I can actually feel sitting on that. This was absolutely full.
You took her back to the house.
Yeah.
How hard was that?
Extremely hard. Extremely hard. For her, it was beyond brave. And for us, it was something that I've been in a lot of crime scenes before with victims and offenders and stuff like that, but that was an experience I've never ever seen before.
And why do you say that?
Oh, she was transitioning right before our eyes, you know, and she was experiencing horror in there right before our eyes.
Along this wall here was the twin tub.
That's a twin tub washing machine.
The twin tub washing machine, the one that he knocked me over endlessly.
This was an investigation that was meticulous but painful.
As triggering and harrowing as it may seem to be watching this footage, I want to leave Jeni's story with a happy ending. Only made possible not by trapping her, holding her against her will, using her as a guinea pig, and forcing her to confront her own demons, but by catching and confronting the real demon in this story.
She is testament to what a human being will do to survive.
Hopefully I will be bouncing.
An energetic wish her father might get 25 years jail.
I impose an aggregate sentence of imprisonment for 45 years.
45 years! Holy
What Richard Haynes did to Jennifer in their Greenacre home will see him leave prison in a body bag.
Typically accompanied with significant psychological abuse, brutality and cruelty.
That's what you get when you rape your child.
That was Muscles speaking. Jeni's 2,500 diagnosed personalities started with Symphony, a 4-year-old girl who shouldered the trauma to protect Jeni, then splintered again and again.
If he thinks that anything he does now is going to impact on me, it's my life now.
And now Richard Haynes lives in fear.
The offender has been threatened multiple times by other inmates.
He might have 10% of what he put me through, but nobody in prison will be making him go, I want it, I need it, I love it.
The reason I wanted to show you Tim's story and Jeni's story is to emphasise the stark contrast between attaching stigma to DID and treating them like they're the ones who have a problem versus acceptance and understanding, and treating the real villain like the villain that they are, and not treating the victim as if they're not credible. These are important points to keep in mind when we watch the body cam footage and witness for ourselves how the police deal with DID in America and the net effect of Lima's approach to her sisters, which goes something like this.
How can you compel people to go? Because, I mean, I do think that
you
the
have
people
to force it. It has to be a choice of the state. You have to.
Oh, wow.
You have to.
Lima says you're not allowed to hurt anybody, and hurting yourself is hurting somebody, and you're not allowed to do that in America. I would argue people only spiral because of stigma. We see here in these two examples, Tim survived because of his alters, and he made a career in the military, which is hurting people, by the way. It wasn't until after the military that Tim came to terms with stigma and turned his life around. In Jeni's case, she was able to study at medical school and become a doctor in the mental health sciences, and again, she was able to do that with the help of her alters. Jeni says time and time again that dissociative identity disorder is a result of abuse. So tell me, Lima, how does continuing to abuse somebody help to fix them? Or more to the point, why do you need to fix them? Why can't you just support them? I don't know what medications, if any, Tim and Jeni are on. I know myself that I opted not to be medicated. I opted to simply accept, hey, I'm different. I don't need to change me. Yeah, I went through some destructive phases in my life, but, I sorted it out and I did it without drugs. These are 3 separate cases where individuality plays a role, and I can tell you with first-hand experience that spiral downwards almost always comes from stigma. So the question on my mind regarding the twins is, whose harebrained idea was it to shuffle them between 17 different facilities per year and have them diagnosed or misdiagnosed to begin with? Was it their loved ones who didn't like the movie content they were creating? Or having a go at them because they're different, because they talk to themselves, or create fandangled mind maps on how to paint and make music? That moment when you try to force who you are and what your reality is onto somebody else, and you make them feel badly because they're not you and your reality is not theirs, that's the moment when the spiraling begins. That's the stigma. Coming along later and shoving medication into the problem is simply treating the symptoms, not the cause. I would argue that the cause of the twin spiral is Lima and her mother. And the only reason I would present that argument is because that is what Dahlia said out of her own mouth. Much like Dr. Jeni Haynes, I don't believe that just because somebody has a mental health issue that you can't believe what they're saying. I believe that when somebody's been abused, which has caused a mental health issue, you don't punish the victim, you punish the perpetrator. Anyway, I hope this was a sufficient introduction to the mental health component when we watch the body cam footage of Dahlia's recent arrest. So, stay tuned.